All right, Uncle Jack, glad to have you here today. Today is Wednesday, June 22nd, 2022. And I'd love to hear about your life, Uncle Jack, starting at the beginning. So if you could tell us, where were you born, when were you born, and what were your first memories as a child?
It's good to be here with you, Russell. And I was born on March 23rd, 1950, in Chicago, Illinois. My dad, who was a doctor, was working in a hospital there. He was an intern. And we had a very small apartment. I don't remember it. We were only there for a brief period, a year, I think just over a year and a half. And just my mom and my dad and me. I was the firstborn. And it was a small apartment right near the L, downtown. The L is the elevated train. And the elevated train would go by on a repeat basis. My mom said it was so loud. They would come into the little room they had for me, and I would always wake up. But they would wait until the L came by, because I never woke up when that came by. So it was rackety, and then they could come in the room and get what they needed. During that time, actually, the Salk vaccine came out, and my mom took me. My dad, the Salk vaccine was a polio vaccine, and that was a dreaded disease at the time. My mom said that my dad told her they were getting in the vaccine, and it was going to be announced on Monday, and everybody was going to be flooding the hospital to get their kids vaccinated. And he told her, we just got it in. It was on Saturday. If you come Saturday night and come to the back of the hospital, that I'll be able to vaccinate Jackie. That's what they called me. And so she went out late Saturday night to the back of the hospital. And she said she got around a corner to the back of the hospital, and the line at the back of the hospital was 2 blocks long. Everybody who was in the hospital had said the same thing,
Wow.
So that we can get in there and get our kids vaccinated. Anyway, we lived there a short time. My dad didn't, at that time, they didn't pay interns anything, so he didn't have any money, and my mom tried to work, but of course she was taking care of me. They were broke, and so they ultimately he decided he was going to have to join the Air Force. The Air Force needed doctors because the Korean War had started. They needed doctors. He had been in the Navy in World War II, but he had been released, and so that's why he was in Chicago. But even though he'd had a discharge, they couldn't make any money, and so he decided to join the Air Force. And he went to the Air Force recruiting office. They were paying officers very well. He went to the Air Force recruiting office, and they looked through the file. They said, "We'd love to have you, but we can't because you haven't been discharged from the Navy." And he said, "I can't believe that. I know I was discharged from the Navy." They didn't have computers back then. Everything was on a paper card. So they said, "Well, I'm sorry, we can't enlist you if you haven't been discharged from the Navy." So he came home and he asked my mom, "Do you have that piece of paper they gave me, that discharge thing from the Navy and honorable discharge?" And she said, "That thing was nice and kind of cardboard, kind of heavy." She said, "I think I used that as a drawer liner, one of our drawers." And so she went back in my room, pulled out the drawer, got out all the diapers. Sure enough, it was a drawer liner in there. So she was able to pull that out, and he could take it down to the Air Force recruiting office, and they accepted it, and so he joined the Air Force. And after after basic training, he was assigned to Germany. His unit was a forward listening base. They were afraid the Russians were going to come across to Germany, and so they were part of that forward listening base. He was in a Luftwaffe base that hadn't been bombed during the Second World War. So we were all there, my mom, Dad, and me. When my dad started, he was there alone. He was in charge of the hospital that was there on the base. And my mom brought me over, I think it was like 6 or 9 months later, to join him. And she said that when they flew over, I was sick and I had a fever. And she told the person on board the transport that I had a fever and, that I was sick. And they said, well, if you're sick, we can't take you all the way into Germany. We have to stop at the deployment area in London and get him treated before we can bring him to Germany. And so they gave her a thermometer, said, take his temperature, see if he has a fever. And Mom took the thermometer and stuck it in her own mouth.
No way.
When they came back, she was like, oh, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. It's normal, it's fine. So
wow.
They went all the way into Germany. My younger sister Ginger was born there in Germany. They had a bed that they had made. Back then you had a lot of things made, and they gave the specifications to the German carpenter who built the bed. And the carpenter told them only the French have beds like this. Way too big. Gigantic bed. So they called that bed Harris Field. That was
That's awesome.
That was Harris Field. But anyway, Ginger was born there, and I think for a total of 2 years, just over 2 years. Over there, came back to the States, went to Indianapolis, where he was a resident at Indiana University, working for Dr. Shoemaker, and working in open heart surgery, which was a brand new field. He went to Yale, but they didn't have any courses in heart surgery there because it didn't exist. So he got to work with Dr. Shoemaker to do open heart surgery. Ultimately, he got offers. My mom said, someplace warm. She wants to go warm. She had been to Indiana, she'd been to Illinois, she'd been to Germany. She said, I want someplace warm. So he took the offer in the southernmost place, which happened to be Nashville, Tennessee. That's how we wound up there. And so I went to grammar school in Nashville. I guess I started in Indiana, and then in Nashville we had a rented house, and first grade, second grade was there. My dad built a house on Eastland Avenue in Nashville, and I think when we moved there, I was about in the third grade, and went to elementary school there, and through the sixth grade. And at that point, we moved to West Nashville. The second house my dad designed with an architect and built there in West Nashville. And that was on Hillsborough Road. And that's where I started MBA. That was in the seventh grade. I guess we moved in the summer between my sixth grade and seventh grade year, and then started in the seventh grade. And,
So if we could go back real quick, I'm just curious where your head was during all these moves. So first off, what was Germany like? Do you remember anything? Do you have any memories of being in Germany?
The truth is I don't. I think you get fooled a little bit when you see photographs. You see them and they're common to you. You kind of think you remember it. The reality is I don't think I did. I don't think guys remember as much as women do. I think women can remember like their kindergarten and first grade and stuff. I don't know if they make that up or if it's just really true, but they seem to remember more. I don't remember.
Yeah.
In those early years, really. To be fair, I don't think I remember that.
Yeah. And so then you go to MBA in 7th grade.
Mm-hmm.
And what was that like? What was MBA like back then? Was it different in a way, or how did you perceive MBA, and how did others, like the community, perceive MBA at the time?
Yeah, it was different back then, but Nashville was different back then, and I remember it as a very different place from what I've seen. Now I have been back, I've gone to several of those. I've had several of those opportunities to go back and see the school and tour the school and all that. And those reunion things. And yeah, it's a very different school. It was a much simpler time, it was a simpler school and a simpler time. And I guess a lot of things are the same. But it was very low key. We wore play clothes to school. We didn't have caps or gowns or any of that for graduation. We wore a shirt and a blazer and a tie, and we didn't have any of there was no art. There was no art building. We didn't have any painting or sculpture or any of that kind of stuff. We didn't.
Did you all do many events with Harpeth Hall? Were they a good sister school, or?
They were okay. They supplied the cheerleaders,
yeah,
which was good, and they hosted the spaghetti supper. I don't know if they do that anymore, but they hosted the spaghetti supper, like a fundraiser. And the cheerleaders at the time, they had skirts that went below their knee, and they had sweaters and skirts below the knee, and they didn't do any acrobatics or anything like that. They stood there. The big thing was they had a gigantic megaphone, and they would literally lead the cheers, and that was it. But it was always exciting on game day, Friday. Cheerleaders would come in, in assembly, and they would lead the cheers, and that was always very exciting. The city cheers. We never saw girls on campus, so that was pretty thrilling.
Yeah. So what was your experience like, your point of view from MBA? How was school for you? Did you enjoy school? Did you not? How was the social aspect of high school and middle school for you?
Well, partly for me, I was a little bit isolated in that regard because up until 7th grade, I had been on the other side of town. So the people that I knew, girls, whatever, they were all on the other side of town. And my entire experience was with MBA boys. And they were really, I think guys get along better than, girls do. I had daughters, and I can say that in middle school, girls can be mean to each other and be, hard on each other and all that. The guys really didn't seem to be. I mean, they were fine, Nobody cared what anybody else wore or.
Yeah. And how did you do in school? What were your favorite subjects? What were your least favorite subjects?
I always felt at MBA like I was one of the dumber guys. I really did. And When I graduated, actually, I graduated exactly in the middle of my class. There were 56 seniors. Now let's see, there were 50, yeah. I think there were 56 seniors and I graduated 28th in my class. I think that's what it was. And I was exactly in the middle.
So funny.
But I always felt like I was in the lower 20%.
Do you think that's something you put on yourself? Are you hard on yourself about that kind of thing?
Not particularly. It's just, it just seemed evident to me that, there were a lot of guys who were smarter than me at MBA. And, yeah, I think, I wasn't particularly upset by it, but it was clear to me that there were a lot of really smart guys at that school.
So what about teachers? Did you have a favorite teacher or least favorite teacher while you were at MBA?
Let's see. I liked Mrs. Lowry. I thought she was great. And I liked, let's see, in the 7th grade, I had Mr. Novak. I remember him. I thought he was great. Mr. Carter, who was the headmaster of the school, he also taught, and thought he was pretty good, Francis Carter. I guess because it was the only experience that I had, I didn't really know kids who had gone to other schools, It just seemed pretty normal to me. I didn't feel like it was an exceptional experience. I'll tell you one thing though, when I decided to choose a college, I wanted a co-ed college. I didn't know any girls, and at MBA there were no girls. So I wanted a co-ed college. Yeah.
So how did you get into that process of looking at different schools? Which schools did you look at, and how did you end up choosing one?
I think it's actually, I think that process is usually a mistake for most high school kids. At the time, of course, there was no internet, and there was, you couldn't look up stuff like that. So they had a big book, and it had a perfect binding, like a phone book. It was perfect bound. It was white. You flip through and had one page for each school, organized alphabetically, and it would give you, the name of the school and population there, and where it was located, and specialized in. It was co-ed, all those things, were median SATs, all that was on the page. Just a brief about the school. And I started looking through it, and there were a lot of schools, man. So I kind of stopped at the C's. And I found Center College, and I think, inertia is a very powerful influence on everyone. I think I was comfortable with MBA, I knew it, and I wanted like that experience, except with girls and not in Nashville, because I wanted to, be on my own. And Center College looked like that. It was just, a small school, about the same population as MBA. Had girls. And but the reality is I think that is kind of a mistake. I think the process of doing that is a mistake. High school kids don't know what they want. They don't have any idea. And we did the whole thing, we went to campuses. I went to Davidson, I went to let's see, there was one in, I think it was Southwestern at Memphis. I think that's now called Rhodes College. But we went to several different ones, and went to Emory, actually. And as a high school kid, you don't know what you're doing. And you're walking around campus, oh, I like the flowers. I saw that pretty girl. I want to go to school here. Or, oh, that dorm room looks great, like the desk. I mean, what do you know? So, yeah, I don't think. And maybe it's just because I was in the middle of my class. I wasn't as sophisticated as others. But the truth is, I don't think high school kids have the competence to make that kind of choice.
Yeah, fair enough. So before we get into college, I'd like to hear about what at home was like when you were in high school. What was it like growing up with Mama and Papa? What were your siblings like as you were growing up? Let's just start there.
Well, most of my life, there were just the four of us. Most of my life it was my mom and dad, and Ginger, me. Julie and Jean came later. And so when I went to college, I went to college, I think Julie was like 8, so they were young, they were young kids. And so I went to college. I never really came back and lived in Nashville again. So, they were young. But my dad was a doctor. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. Made dinner, made breakfast, packed our lunches. We had a maid. Usually we had a maid. We had a series, I guess 2 or 3 maids that I remember. My dad would come home at night, and if we had something that we had to ask for or talk about or something, my mom would always say, not now, let your dad. She would make him a cocktail, and he would go into the living room. We had a den, and we had a living room, formal living room. He would go into the living room, and everybody would be quiet, and he'd go in there, and he'd put his feet up, have a cocktail, and he and my mom would talk. They would talk about the day. I don't know what they talked about. We never got a chance to be in there, but, they would talk and so forth. And enjoy a cocktail. And usually it was some kind of a tall, it would be like gin and tonic. I know he drank that a lot. He drank gin and tonic. And but she would make a cocktail right into the living room, and they would be in there, and all the kids would be in the den or their rooms or whatever and he would just do a little unwinding and just chat with my mom. And then after a while, he would come out, and then we could ask him for, whatever it was we wanted, or whatever, whatever the situation, tell him the bad news about something or another. But we didn't do that until he had been in there alone. You couldn't go into the living room. And after a while, he'd come out.
So what were they like raising you? Were they on the stricter side? Were they more lenient? Or were they both different in their own ways? How did it feel being raised by your parents?
Yeah, they were, partially that it was them, and partially it was just the time. It was a simpler time in the 50s, the 60s, just a simpler time. So my dad was busy. He was busy all the time. I mean, all the time. He didn't keep regular, like, doctor hours. He was at Vanderbilt doing research when he wasn't a doctor. He was a doctor at Miller Clinic. And as a doctor, he was, he had worked his regular doctor hours, but then he was an associate, professor of clinical surgery. And so he did research on dogs. He was doing vascular research on dogs. Like I said, they didn't really have heart surgery. Heart surgery didn't exist. And so he was doing research, doing vascular transplants and all that sort of thing with dogs. And so he ultimately got to the point where he was going to try this surgery on humans. And at that point, after he'd done it a few times, he and Dr. Hart formed a partnership and went out on their own, and he was a heart surgeon. So, but that didn't happen until I was in college. I was in college when that happened.
Yeah.
So, although Gene and Julie, my younger sisters only remember that part of his life, as a heart surgeon. Of course, he wasn't a heart surgeon most of the time that I was at home.
Yeah. So who do you think you're more like? Do you think you're more like your mom or your dad?
Yeah, that's interesting. To be honest, I don't really think I'm like either one of them. I really don't think so. I think I was just different. Certainly wasn't as smart as my dad, and maybe not as patient as my mom. I don't know. I kind of don't think I'm like either one of them. But they were great folks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Closing in on the 30-minute mark, so I'll just stop real quick. Go ahead. Talk about Mr. Pickering.
Oh yeah. I mean, I had him for I think it was 10th grade English. Mr. Pickering, which I really liked him a lot. He's the guy who subsequently wrote that book. I think Robin Williams starred in the
Dead Poets Society?
The Dead Poets Society.
No way.
Yeah, he was my teacher. And he was great. He was a very interesting and different kind of.
Wow, I didn't know that. I just watched Dead Poets Society about 2 months ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the story, I watched that too, and it's not really about NBA. But anyway, Mr. Pickering was an interesting, he was an interesting teacher. And he did a lot of weird things, that would kind of wake you up and make you, think differently.
Do you remember any of them? Like any?
Oh, yeah, sure. I mean, he taught an entire class with 2 trash cans. He had 1 foot in each trash can, just walking around the class like that with these 2 trash cans. And, it was just, he taught a whole class from outside the classroom. So we were in the classroom, and at that time we had windows that didn't open up like this. They sort of opened out like that. And he had the windows open like that. We didn't have air conditioning, but he had the windows open like that. He was outside, and he was talking through the window, and then he'd walk around and talk through the other window over there. So it was hard to, understand what he was doing. But he did this stuff, and he taught a whole class from on top of the desk. He stood up on top of the desk and, did the whole class from on top of the desk. And it was always, going into his class was always interesting and fun. And, you didn't know what he was going to do. And that always made it, you were always a little bit more attentive and a little, he was always a little bit more interesting. There's a lot of, in in the school, there was a lot that was done by rote. And I don't know how much they still do that in MBA, but there was a lot that was done by rote. And you had certain things like you had to be in the class before the bell, and then you were sitting down, and then when the teacher would enter the room, you had to stand. And then you couldn't sit until the teacher sat. So the teacher would sit, and then you would sit. And frequently, there was teaching from the desk, sort of desk as podium kind of thing. And Mr. Pickering didn't do any of that. So you had to figure out for yourself what you were going to do, because none of it was.
That's so funny. So, obviously he was influential to you, but did you have anybody else who was really influential, or did you know what you wanted to be when you grew up? Like, did you have that vision when you were younger of like, this is what I want to be when I grow up?
No, I didn't. I didn't have any of that. That the truth is, actually, I went through college as an English major because I liked it. But then I got to the end of college and I realized I could either teach English or starve or perhaps both. And so at that point, really, it wasn't until the end of senior year that I decided, I need to go to trade school. Basically, I need to learn a trade. So that was when I went to graduate school in business.
So let's back up to college. So what was it like your freshman year, the first time you're truly away from home? What were your feelings like? What was Center itself like to you?
Yeah. Oh, it was great. I mean, it was like, I think most kids, who get away from home for the first time, yeah, it was great. It was fabulous.
Were you able to make friends quickly? Because I assume you didn't know anybody there.
I didn't know anyone, but that was fine. I mean, I made friends quickly. Some of them are still friends today. And made friends quickly and had a great time. And the one advantage of a small school, because I have lots of disadvantages, but the one advantage of a small school is you get to do everything. And so, if you want to play football, you can play football. You want to be on the swimming team? Sure, you can be on the swim team. You want to, I liked, I didn't take courses in theater, I took courses in English, but I wanted to be in plays. I was in plays. In a big school, you would have to be a theater major in your senior year to even try out for a principal part in a drama. When I was like a sophomore, I was in plays and, whatever you want, sure.
Do you remember any of your roles?
Yeah, I do. We let's see. I was in the birthday party by Harold Pinter. I was Goldberg. And I was at, let's see. I think there were 2 Shakespeare productions. I was in in fact, when I was in one play, let's see, I was a father. And at the time, I had a full beard and long hair, and I had to be this father, so I had to cut my, did I ever tell you that? Yeah, I had to cut my beard and leave just a mustache, and had to have my hair cut short. And so, for that play, I was dating a girl. Her name was Sally Miller.
This is in real life or in the play?
No, this is in real life. I was dating Sally Miller at Center, and I knew I was going to have to cut my hair and cut my beard and do all this stuff. So, but I didn't tell her that, you know, I was going to be in this play. So, we'd been dating for some time. And so I prepped her for this. I said, yeah, Sally, I've got this brother, we don't get along, and, he's going to be coming to visit me, and, I'm just not real excited about it. So, yeah, of course, he's a woman, so she's like, oh, why don't you get along with your brother? So I was like, yeah, I mean, he's, I don't know, but you'll see when he gets here, and, the toughest part is we've been, together all our lives. He's my twin. She's like, twin? He's your twin brother? Yeah, I let all of this come out, slowly. And so it got up, we passed the dress rehearsal to all this. We got prepared. And so I did the whole thing, cut the hair, got my, off the beard, found an old pair of glasses that I had, put on these old glasses. And so I went over to her dorm, and I said, at the time they had an attendant in the front of the dorm. We'd call up to the rooms. There were no cell phones or anything like that. So, I asked for her to come down. And, she came down, clean shaven, cut hair, eyeglasses. And I said, when I first saw her, I said, you must be Sally. I have heard so much about you. And Jack is not one to share details, but I have been looking for him all over the place and I can't find him. Can you help me? And she was like, you could see the wheels turning and everything going on. And she was like, oh yeah, you must be Robert. Yes, of course. Well, she said, I know we can find him. I know we can find him. So she took me all over campus. She took me to my fraternity house. It was a Phi Delta. She took me to introduced me to all of my fraternity brothers, explained that I was really Robert, and we were looking for Jack. And all my fraternity brothers were like, okay. She took me all over the campus, introduced me to people. So we broke up after that. And I did the play. But it was fun. It was really fun.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So that was good.
Wow.
So I was in a lot of plays. I enjoyed that. And learned a lot about, presentation and all that sort of thing. So good, learned a lot about drama.
So were you into drama before, like when you were in high school? Was that an interest?
No, not really. No, we saw a play. When I was a freshman, I saw plays in college, and I thought, man, I could do that. That looks like fun.
Yeah. So what were some of your interests and hobbies in college? I know you said you joined a fraternity.
I did. So. I joined Phi Delta Theta. That was fun. I was on the swim team. I swam butterfly, of all things. I was absolutely no good, but it was fun. It was something that I could, and if I'd gone to a bigger university, I couldn't have done that.
Did you swim in high school?
No.
Did you play any sports in high school?
I played football. I was never any good at that either. but I did play, and I was always, at the time, our high school football team was really good, like really good, state champions every year, all that kind of stuff. I played in the Clinic Bowl, I think, on Thanksgiving, and we were always state champions.
What position did you play?
I played tackle, left tackle.
How tall were you at that? Like when in high school, had you already fully grown, or did you grow?
No, I was probably about 6 feet.
Yeah.
I think I was about 6 feet, and I can't remember what I would have weighed, but I, probably weighed 200, 6 feet, 200. Which was, you would think pretty big, but. And I played against, I was not on the first team, so we always played against the first team. And I was always lined up against Sandy Howery. I remember that. And Sandy Howery would just beat the crap out of me every single time we played. He would just beat the crap out of me over and over. And there would be like one time that I could get through, but he was, and it turned out Sandy Howery was, he was all state, all American, and went to Vanderbilt and played football at Vanderbilt, but still no consolation. He was really rough. And then if we ever did get through, we couldn't, the guys who wore the red jerseys, we couldn't tackle them, and I did get through once, and I was like, and then I couldn't hit anybody.
That's great. So, sorry to keep jumping over, but back in high school, so what were your interests and hobbies when you were a teenager? What did you enjoy doing?
Well, I had a little group of friends, and we did some, I don't know if you would call it camping out, but we slept outside. We had all of us had 22 caliber rifles. That was, we were in the country. We were actually in the country in that house on Hillsborough Road. At the time, we could have cows in our front yard. That they would get out from Guilford Dudley's place and come over there, eat our grass and stuff. So it was, it was in the country. It was on the way out to Franklin, which at the time was another city, far out. So it was a kind of a country living, and we all had our 22 caliber, rifles, and we would go squirrel hunting, which mainly was just shooting up in the trees, and we would, everybody had their own gun. I had a lever action 22 Marlin, which subsequently I took to a gunsmith and had him redo it. And it's really, looks like new. James visited once. I showed him the gun. It looks like new. It looks like a nice gun now, but it got pretty beat up at the time. But mine was a lever action. Let's see. John Harden had the bolt action, and Jimmy Porter had a semi-automatic. I think it was a 5-shot, semi-automatic 22. And and we would take the guns and go out, and I think I told you we would get on the bus and ride the bus with our guns down to the railroad tracks. But at the time, it was the railroad tracks, and now is 440 that goes around Nashville. But at the time, it was railroad tracks, and it was cleared, and there were woods on either side, so we'd go hunting. But at that time, you know, kids just went out and when I say kids, I mean, we were like, you know, 13, 14, you know, with our guns going out on the bus, and, you know, we'd be gone. My mom wouldn't even know, you know, where we were, but it was okay. I mean, you know, we weren't getting into too much trouble, you know. So, but now, you know, obviously you wouldn't do any of that. But
so if I recall, there was a certain modification to one of those guns done one time.
yeah,
Is that correct?
yeah.
So what happened there?
Well, John Harden, who, by the way, now I think he's retired now, but he was a banker in Alabama. I think that's what he wound up doing. Anyway, John Harden, he had a bolt action 22, and it was one of those like you'd shoot at summer camp. You know, it had a bolt, single shot. You'd put in one, and then you'd pull back the pin, and you could shoot once. Bolt action. And he decided that he was going to modify it. So the first thing we did, his dad had a workshop. It was like a separate building behind his house. And his dad had a workshop, and so we went into John's workshop and put the gun in a vise and got out a saw. And you know, you've got the stock that goes up against your cheek, and then you got a kind of like a pistol area like that, and then so we cut it off at the stock and just had the pistol part, you know. So that was kind of cool, and so that was fun. And we shot it like that for a while. Then we decided because John had, you know, his dad had a lot of tools and stuff, and he had the saw was fine. It was just like a, you know, just like a saw, wood saw. But he found out that his dad had a pipe saw, which is like a hacksaw, except a really fine blade hacksaw. So we could cut off the barrel. So got that thing in the vise, cut off the barrel. First we only cut off like 4 or 5 inches of it just to see if it would shoot. The problem was that you lost the sight on the end of it. But still you could point it, shoot it. That was cool. But then we cut off more of it. And then we got it pretty short, and then it looked a little bit more like a pistol, you know. But the problem was that you know, we still had the action, trigger, all that. Had the wooden, just the part of the stock that went out. So the problem was that he couldn't really carry it around very well, because it wouldn't have, we'd cut off the part that would house the sling. So, you know, you couldn't sling it. It wasn't, you know, it was kind of cumbersome. So then we just took off the stock entirely and just removed it. And at that point, it was just like a stick with a trigger hanging down, because the trigger guard was part of the stock, and you know. So anyway, it had just the trigger guard. I mean, just the trigger hanging down and the action. So we took that thing out, and that was cool because you could put it in your back pocket, you know. And we used that. It was not very accurate, but if you were like within, you know, 6 to 10 feet or something, you could shoot it. So that was cool. And ultimately, John wanted to have a holster for it, so to make it easier to carry around. Because he stuck it in his belt, but then the thing would fall out. It was too long to put in your back pocket very much. So he wanted a holster. So we took the bus. Porter and Harden and I took the bus to downtown Nashville. Now, of course, downtown Nashville wasn't anything like it is today. But we went downtown and there were pawn shops downtown. That was the thing, pawn shops downtown. And so we went into a pawn shop, and there was a black guy behind the counter of the pawn shop. And I remember, this was so cool. This black guy was wearing an NBA ring. Clearly pawned by somebody, he had a gold NBA ring. And of course, he had no idea what it was, but he had a gold NBA ring. That was cool. But anyway, so we went into the pawn shop, and Hardin goes, looking for a holster. And the guy goes, for what? And John reaches back and pulls out this stick, it's like 10 inches long, trigger hanging down. Well, he puts it on the glass counter like that. This black, I took one look at that, and he said, "You goddamn boy." He said, "Get that thing and get out of here." I mean, I don't know how many federal laws we must have been breaking with that thing, but he was like, "You pick that up. I'm not picking that up. Get the hell out of here and don't come back." So we later, let's see, I think it was Porter. Yeah, I think Porter had a Bowie knife. And so we wound up taking Porter's Bowie knife, and it had a sheath. And we wound up taking the Bowie knife, and we soaked it, the sheath, in water, and got it soft enough that we could stick the barrel of that down into the Bowie knife sheath, and then had it dry like that, and made a pretty good holster. I think it was, pretty good.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
We'd love to hear about Porter's gun, and then we can go back forward into college and after college from there.
Well, okay. Well, Porter's gun was the semi-automatic, and that was Hardin's gun that was modified with the bolt action. But Porter's gun was a semi-automatic, had a little clip. I think it was a 5-shot clip that went in the bottom of the rifle, and it seems to me it might have been a Remington, but I can't remember. Anyway, his gun we used a file on. It was a semi-automatic, so you had, every time you pulled the trigger, it would shoot. And I've forgotten what we filed off, but it was something in the mechanism that we went to his shop, got it in the vise, filed it off, and got it back on there so that it was like fully automatic. It was like, you'd pull the trigger and it would go, like five shots, which was kind of cool. And then, but it did kind of, it was sort of dangerous. And so we were out running around, and he lived, Porter lived off of Tyne Boulevard, and they had 22 acres. It was a big, backyard. We would go back there a lot. And anyway, we were running after something, and I think it might have been, maybe it was a raccoon or something, but we were running after it. And it was in the evening, and we were running after it and chasing it and trying to shoot it, and Porter hit a pig fence. A pig fence is just like a single strand of barbed wire, and it's only, maybe a foot off of the ground. And anyway, we were running, and he hit that pig fence, and he was falling forward, and it was like, and all of us were ducking. And he had he wound up with a bullet through his pants, through his pant leg, but he didn't get shot. He just had a bullet through his family. But anyway, that
Holy cow.
was Porter's gun.
That's awesome. And last couple questions before we leave high school. What were your first few cars? What was your very first car? What was it like? And
my very first car was my grandma. It had been my grandmother's car. My grandmother had it, and I got it in 1967, I think, and it was a 1960 Dodge Dart Coronet. It was a great big car at the time, blue, which we call the Blue Goose. And the Blue Goose was a great big four-door Dodge with a 318 two-barrel, I remember. And the Blue Goose was it had been my grandmother's car. I modified it a little bit, the Dodge, because it had no radio, and I wanted to have a radio. My grandmother, I think, she was afraid of a radio, might distract her or something when she was driving. So I wanted a radio, and the other major thing was didn't like the steering wheel. The steering wheel was big, and it was oval, not round. It was a really big oval steering wheel, and when you would turn a corner, it would be like ba-boom, ba-boom, ba-boom. It was, I don't know, like 6 turns lock to lock, and boom, ba-boom, ba-boom. And it would hit your thighs when it would go, it was that big, so it was. So I did replace the steering wheel on it with a round steering wheel. They got at Western Auto. It was a round steering wheel. And the steering wheel had a button. Of course, they didn't have airbags back then, but it had a button for the horn in the middle, but I couldn't get that to work. I couldn't get the horn button to work. So ultimately, I decided, back in those days, the bright and dim for the headlights was a little button on the floorboard to the left of the brake pedal. There was a metal button. So I decided to get a button beside it for the horn. So I just wired up the horn. It was just a 12-volt thing. I wired that up so I could press that little button and honk the horn with my left foot. So that was the horn. And I had a smaller round steering wheel. And then the radio, because there were no standards for radios, it was just whatever the manufacturer did. So you had to get a radio for that. So I had to go to the junkyard and pull a radio out of a 1960 Dodge and bolt it in and wire it up. So that was, those were my 2 main modifications.
Yeah.
On the 60 Dodge. And then when I left for college in 68, September of 68, I left for college. When I did, then Ginger got the 60 Dodge. And she actually went back to the old steering wheel, which I couldn't figure, but she left the radio in.
So you go off to college and you don't have a car at all?
No.
So how did you get around college?
Well, it was a small town and, mainly walk. I mean, it was a small school in a small town with a small campus. We mainly walked. Occasionally someone would go what they called over the hill, and you'd ride with them. That it was a dry county, and you had the neighboring county was a wet county, and so you'd go over the hill, and you go over the hill to the wet county to buy booze and bring it back, beer or whatever, bring it back to campus.
Yeah.
somebody was going over the hill, you'd ride with them and, you know, make a booze run.
So did you spend most of your time at the fraternity, or what did you spend most of your time in college doing outside of class?
You know, it was a very small campus, and so the fraternity was sort of the entertainment for all the college students. Because the county was dry, we didn't really have any restaurants. We obviously didn't have any bars. We didn't have, you know, the city didn't offer any infrastructure. Today, that's all different. That county, Boyle County, Kentucky, is now wet. And so now they have everything. They have sports bars, they have pool tables, they have, you know, they have everything. Pizza parlors with beer, and, you know, they've got all kinds of infrastructure for nice restaurants and so forth. We had none of that. So we were dependent on the fraternities for that kind of stuff.
How many fraternities were there at Center, and how many people were in yours specifically?
There were 6 fraternities, and in our fraternity, active members, there were perhaps 40, maybe.
Gotcha.
Maybe between 30 and 40.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when did you have your first drink? Your first beer, your first...
Oh, well, that would have been in high school, like most people.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we drank mainly beer. I don't think I drank any, I don't believe I had whiskey or anything like that until college. And that was sort of the first time. But I drank beer in high school, and probably a lot of beer in high school. A friend of mine and I, Jim Booth, and I used to drive around and drink beer and, you know, bullshit, and, you know, so that was fun, and we did that in high school. But I guess real liquor, not until college for drinking.
Yeah.
And I probably, like most college freshmen anyway, drank more than I should have. So it was probably not a bad idea that I didn't have a car. I think that's probably a good rule for most college freshmen.
Yeah.
But it was, you know, I mean, entertainment was okay. We had live bands. We had, you know, things that you would not normally associate with a smaller fraternity like that. You know, we had big parties and live bands, and everybody was basically invited. The other fraternities would show up, and, you know, the other students would show up, and, you know, it was sponsored by the fraternity. Yeah. And then we would attend when our other fraternities would have parties.
Gotcha. So who were some of your closest friends in college?
You mean their names, or?
Yeah, if you had any that are still friends to this day, or
yeah,
who you were really close with during those years.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, you know, David Smith was he's an attorney in Rome, Georgia. We still communicate now. I mean, he was a good friend and a fellow fraternity member. I had, I think I told you my roommate was named Chuck Mitty, and Chuck was an assigned. He was a pool roommate. I mean, I hadn't requested him or anything. He was my roommate first year of college as a freshman, and he was as I've said, he was the best roommate I ever had. I think we spoke maybe fewer than half a dozen times the whole year. And, it was just, hey, Chuck, hey, Jack, this is it, close enough. And so he was a nice guy. But I didn't hang around that much with the theater group, although I was in a lot of plays. I wasn't really a theater group kind of guy. I was more the guys on the swim team, the guys in the fraternity, the guys on my hall. I mean, I had a varied group of friends in college.
Yeah. And so what was your dating life like? I know you dated Sally. What else outside of Sally was your dating life like in college?
I guess, like most guys who have been in an all-boys school and are suddenly exposed to women in the college, I love that. Saturday didn't go by or Friday didn't go by without having a date. I loved dating. I loved having different girls that I went out with, and I went out with a lot of different girls. I didn't have much in the way of steady girlfriends. I what do they call it? Dated around. I dated around a lot, and I did not date Charlotte until my senior year, and we started dating. Actually, we ran into each other on. We knew each other. I mean, small campus, everybody knew everybody. But we didn't date until my senior year. Actually, we ran into each other on Halloween night, 71, I guess that was. Graduated in 72. So my senior year, I did date Charlotte, but she was dating other guys, I guess ran in other areas, and I never thought about asking her out, but anyway, but that came later. But I didn't have many steady girlfriends. I went out with a lot of girls. It was sort of an embarrassment of riches, having so many girls in a college environment.
So then did you and Charlotte become pretty steady from then on? Or how did that
kind of
evolve?
Yeah. We became steady. We dated each other from, I guess, about the end of October. So from around then, November, something like that, until the end of the senior year. Yeah.
Gotcha. So then you decide to go to graduate school.
Yeah, and life is so much of a crapshoot. It really is. I mean, you never, all the stuff you think you're planning, life just happens around you and you just respond to it. In this case, I did know that I wanted to do something else because my degree in English literature from a small college in Kentucky wasn't going to get me anywhere. And so I knew I was going to have to do something else. I thought about law school. I thought about a lot of different things, but there was a guy, I don't even know if they do this anymore, but the school that I wound up going to, which I think was called American Graduate School of International Management, everybody just knew it as Thunderbird. The Thunderbird School, they had a program for alumni that alumni would volunteer to go to colleges and universities and just talk about the school. And so one of those alumni went to Centre College and talked about the school. And it was essentially it's an MBA program, but the add-on is a language course and cultural studies. And so you declare a business major, like in my case, marketing, language, mine was Spanish, and then cultural studies, mine was Latin American. So I thought that sounded as good as anything else. And so I did apply, and they accepted me. And, I had to take some test. I can't remember. It wasn't LSAT. It was some other test. And I got in and got my MBA, and or went to Thunderbird, and so it was just a crapshoot. The truth is, if that guy hadn't come, and I don't know what, I would have bumbled around, and there would have been some other decision. But that little decision changed my life, as they say. That's the reason that I was able to go overseas and do what I did subsequently in life. And it was like a 15-minute thing, and changed the entire course of life.
Yeah. So where did that lead after graduate school? So what was your next step after getting your graduate degree?
Well, in fact, that's another example of a crapshoot. We didn't have any email. You want to wait just a minute until this is done?
Yeah. Action.
So at Thunderbird, we didn't have computers, we didn't have email, we didn't have text messaging, any of that. So when companies came to interview, they had a book, a little, I guess it was photocopied book that had every student in it, and what their majors were, and picture of them, just kind of a resume, but not really, because we didn't have anything to say in a resume. But companies would come and they would interview on campus, and they would say, right there, it's some sort of it says battery for.
Yeah, that's good. Here. Sorry.
So since we didn't have any other way to communicate, we didn't have email or text messaging or anything. When companies would come to interview, they would select what students they wanted to interview on campus, and then they would put a list on. It was posted on a bulletin board in the post office. And so when you went in to get your mail, go to the post office, you check the bulletin board, and there was company interviewing, they would have it on the list, and they would have a time slot and who they wanted to interview. Anyway, I was headed to class one day, and I was headed across campus, and one of my friends, Jerry Connor, my friend, he was coming we intersected as he was going someplace and I was going someplace. And Jerry said, "Oh, Jack, I saw you got an interview today with J.I. Case." And I said, "Really? I guess I hadn't checked the bulletin board or hadn't been to the post office, whatever." But, so I hustled over to the post office, and there it was, the sheet, and it had Jack Harrison. And I think it was 10:30 was my interview. And I checked my watch, and it was 10:15. It was like crap. So I ditched class, ran back, got my clean shirt. I always had to have a clean shirt, put on my necktie, my sport coat, and got over there and interviewed. And I hadn't even done any research. I didn't even know what J.I. Case was. And so I had this interview, and I got the job and wound up, moving to Wisconsin, Philippines, and Singapore, and all with J.I. Case Company. And the truth is, if Jerry and I hadn't intersected, I'd have missed that interview. I'd have never known the difference.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, life is like that.
Yeah, Uncle Jack, if you want to talk about life after college, so moving up to Wisconsin, what that was like, being totally dependent on yourself and your work, and what Wisconsin was like, what your first job was like, and everything encompassing that.
Sure. Well, I was hired by J.I. Case. I was the international advertising administrator. I worked for the international advertising manager and did all the advertising. I guess the two of us did all the advertising for J.I. Case Company, which I later learned was a construction equipment manufacturer. They did agricultural equipment, construction equipment. I was in the construction equipment side. And moved to Racine, Wisconsin, headquarters of the company. Part of being hired was that they would move me, and of course at Thunderbird I didn't have anything. I mean, I had some clothes. I didn't have any furniture or anything to be moved. So I asked my mom if she had anything, and she said, "Well, I put together some things I was going to give to Goodwill." And I said, "That's good. I'll take whatever you got, whatever you're going to send to Goodwill." So I had a lamp and a couple of little tables. I think I had one chair, kind of torn up, but I had one chair. And so the moving company came, took those things, brought them to Wisconsin for me. And in Wisconsin, I wanted to buy a house. Because I was feeling really kind of flush. I mean, first job out, was a really great job, and I was making a lot of money. I was making $11,000 a year. And, being kind of a math whiz and everything, I was like, it's almost $1,000 a month. What am I going to do with $1,000 a month? And just too much money to even think about. So I had to buy a house. So I did buy a house. I bought a duplex. It was an over and under. I had that lower unit, rented out the upper unit, and it had already been rented out. And so that worked out really well. I think I paid for that house $24,000. I think that was right. It was either $24,000 or $28,000 for that house. And anyway, it worked out great. And the guy who lived upstairs wound up paying the mortgage, and so it was a sweet deal. I really enjoyed it. And but I have to say, Wisconsin was a shock. I'd never lived that I knew of in a cold climate before, and it was cold. It was real cold, and it was uncomfortably so. We had radiators, and water radiators. It was really cold all the time, and something to get used to.
So where was Charlotte at this point? Did she move up with you?
She moved up slightly after. That was, part of the reason I went to this Thunderbird thing was that they had a program, it was a 12-month program. You get a master's degree in 12 months. You had to go take a full load every semester, and you had to go straight through for 12 months and no break. But if you did, you could get a master's degree in 12 months. So I went in September of '72 and came out at the end of August in '73, and then started at J.I. Case. So that was, Charlotte did come up. We were Subsequently, we were married in 75, and then I wound up going overseas. I think we went in 76. I think it was early 76 that we went overseas. And so that was good. Initially, it was a big move. We had to sell our cars, we had to sell our house, we sold a lot of our stuff, and moved to, we were originally going to move to the Philippines, to either Cebu or Davao, and then it turned out it was going to be Cebu. And we were there for about 6 months in the Philippines, and ultimately there was a change in management in Asian operations, and I wound up going to Singapore. They decided not to put anyone in Cebu, and so we went to Singapore, Cebu was a pretty primitive area in the Philippines, southern Philippines, a little dangerous and kind of primitive, and Singapore was sophisticated, great place to live. We wound up being there for like 7 years. It was wonderful. Learned a lot, traveled throughout Southeast Asia, lots of different countries. Went to, spent a lot of time in Malaysia, a lot of time in Indonesia, in Borneo a lot. 2 of the states of eastern Malaysia are in Borneo, Sabah and Sarawak, and I was there a lot in Borneo. And in Thailand, spent a lot of time in Thailand. Spent time in Ceylon, or now Sri Lanka, and Japan.
So out of those places you just named, did you have a favorite place that you lived?
Well, we lived in Singapore, but
I
traveled to all those other areas, and it was a lot of fun traveling to a lot of those areas. But it was nice living in Singapore. Singapore was a very urban and modern place, and so I felt good about having Charlotte there. It was just the 2 of us, and I felt good about having Charlotte there when I was traveling. It was safe, and she felt good about it too.
So how did you feel going into it? Obviously, once you got there and got comfortable, but did you have any nervousness going in? Did Charlotte have any nervousness going into a whole new place like that?
Yeah. Well, in my memory, I had only lived in America. But Charlotte had lived a lot of places. She was born in Cuba, in Havana, and she went to high school in Argentina, in Buenos Aires. And she had lived outside the U.S. a lot. She only came to the U.S. For college. So I don't think she was as intimidated as I was. I hadn't had that experience. But we were very lucky. Singapore was, very urban. English language was spoken, not by everyone, but by most folks. So.
How did you like your job there, and what did your parents think about you moving to Singapore?
I think they were delighted. That they had a similar experience early in their marriage. Moving overseas and having an international experience, and they always looked on that fondly, and we did too. We really enjoyed it, and I think they were perfectly happy about it. Of course, Charlotte's family, they obviously had lived internationally, so Mom and Dad knew about that.
So what were your biggest takeaways or learnings from living in a different country, culture, everything like that?
You know, the truth is, it really was eye-opening because we got to see not just one culture, but a lot of different cultures, even within Singapore. You know, we got to see the Malay culture, which is the whole Muslim culture. We got to see, obviously, Chinese, more of a Buddhist culture. We got to see, we were in that portion of the population. You know, they divide it by Indian, Malay, Chinese, and then other. And we were in other. So the first time I considered myself other. But that's what we were. So we got to see Tamil, Indian culture, and all that just within Singapore. And then I traveled a lot, Thailand. I got to see Thai, Japanese, and so forth. And I think the biggest takeaway was that I think when we lived, and maybe this is so, I guess it is so now as well. You live in a culture and you just think it's right. I mean, this is the way things should be. Certain things you eat, certain things you don't, certain things you say, and certain things you don't. A way that you live that is just right, and anything else is wrong. And I think when you get real cultural exposure, and I don't mean traveling, I mean actually living in another culture, you really get to see that that's just not so. I mean, there are a lot of different ways to think about the world, and I love that quote. You don't see the world as it is; you see the world as you are, and that is it's an eye opener. It really is. And when you have people, as they did frequently, they would ask us about our culture, and it's an eye opener to realize that you don't really have a culture. I mean, you've got a very sophisticated culture, and we don't really have that.
Yeah.
And they would ask you things, and I remember the Muslims. I think their thing is they pray 5 times a day, and they have a set time for it. And they have a rug, and they face Mecca, and and they pray, and they do it 5 times a day. And I remember being with a guy that I knew very well, who was saying, he said, I think you Christians pray 4 times a day, is that correct? And I said, he said, well, you pray before meals, is that right? And I said, well, I guess, yeah. And then you pray before bed? And I was like, yeah, I guess we do that. So it's 4 times for Christians? And I said, I don't know. I mean, and we had, we had an Amma, which is a servant, they call it an Amma. Our Amma was very understanding. We put up at Christmas, we put up a Christmas tree. Of course, they didn't have Christmas trees, so Charlotte made one out of just a rod and like a hula hoop and some ribbons going up, to make a kind of a tree. And she, in our Amma, she knew it had some religious significance that we had this thing in our home, and she was very respectful and very, nice about it. And she said, Mem, she called Charlotte Mem. I was Master and Mem, and she said, Mem, Mem Sab. But anyway, she called her Mem, and she would say, Mem, she said, this is to be a tree. And Charlotte was like, yes, it's. And she said, and the meaning of this tree? And Charlotte was like, I don't know. I mean, we just do that. I have no idea. And, you know, they knew, like, and they were confused about why we would put up this thing. It was kind of a tree, supposed to represent a tree. We had no idea what it had to do with it.
Yeah.
That's a Christmas. But they were always very generous, you know, about accepting our cultural differences, and they were much more sophisticated about knowing that different cultures had different, you know, they were not as dismissive as, you know, we were accustomed to being.
Interesting.
But it was an eye opener to see these different cultures, their different beliefs, and how they could respect, you know, other beliefs, and we're perfectly okay with it. There's a Muslim holiday called Ramadan, and they don't eat; they fast from sunrise to sundown. And but then at sundown, they have a big meal, and she would bring us food during Ramadan that she had prepared for their Ramadan feast, you know, for their evening feast. And she'd bring us food, and then we didn't know what to do. You know, were we supposed to? Because we wanted to eat it, but I guess we shouldn't eat it. You know, so. But it was delicious. Wow. Great. And these other, I mean, everything we had, that was something that it just awoke a whole sense of, you know, relationship to culture and how that relates to food. Everything we ate was delicious. I mean, Chinese, it's not like Cheyenne food like you get in America. It's completely different cuisine when you have Chinese people preparing Chinese food, and the Indian foods were fabulous. The Malay food was incredible, and when I traveled, of course I traveled much more than Charlotte. When I would go to Thailand and Japan and whatever, those foods were just fabulous. I mean, wonderful to see how they relate to the culture, and you know, they were real works of art. Really, really fun.
What were some of your most memorable meals?
In Thailand, we had some fabulous meals. I guess they did a lot more in terms of banquet. So they would celebrate banquet with food, and frequently big round tables that would seat a dozen or so. The Chinese sort of standard was with the Lazy Susan. You know, they would have a Lazy Susan that would have, you know, multiple dishes in it. They didn't bring out plated dinners like we're accustomed to in the U.S. They would bring out things and put them on the carousel, and you would flip it around and take this or take that, and the whole method of service was different. You would always try to serve someone else something before you took it. You know, you took your own, and people would serve you, and you know, it was just I guess some of those banquets, they also they prepared things that you would not eat on a regular basis when you went to a banquet. Things that you never seen or never heard of before. And that was always fun and exciting. And I've eaten peacock tongue. I've eaten bear's paw. I've eaten nest soup. I've eaten things that are so, and that's part of what makes them special, is that it's something that we frequently think of a special dinner as being something that we've had before and that you're trying to repeat in a better way. So you think of, what's the special? Oh, the special meal is steak and baked potato. It's a special. But, they have a different take on that. How can we serve you something that you've never had before? Not try to do the same thing in some better way, but something that, and when you eat peacock tongue, you're like, how will I ever? I'll never see this again. I mean, yeah,
It's incredible. So moving forward, when did you decide to have kids, and what was it like becoming a parent?
I think like most newlyweds, I was 25. I think Charlotte was 24 when we married, and like most newlyweds, we weren't confident that we wanted to even have children. That would be a big change in our lives, and we just weren't confident that we were ready for it, wanted to have children. But I think at some point in life, you warm up to that idea. And our first daughter was born when we were 30. Actually, I was 30. She was 29. And so Jenny was, we tried for a while. Actually, Charlotte wound up on I think it was Clomid, some drug that was supposed to help, with fertility. And she was pregnant there in Singapore. They had we actually had an OBGYN in Singapore, heard the heartbeat of the baby. They had, and they were pretty sophisticated in terms of medicine and science and so forth in Singapore. And the company had a program where you could, if you were pregnant and living overseas for international folks, you could go back to the U.S. to have American medical care for the delivery and birth. But Charlotte didn't want to do that. She wanted to stay in Singapore, and so she stayed, and Jenny was born in Singapore. She was born a month early, and she was fine. And we were at a hospital called Mount Elizabeth Hospital, which was brand new at the time, brand new hospital.